Norway, land of the midnight sun, awe-inspiring fjords, majestic mountains, unforgettable glaciers, and exceptional wildlife. This is the second episode of my Norway travel documentary series, where we'll take you on a grand road trip all the way up to the Nordkapp. In this episode, we're heading to some of the most famous and awe-inspiring hikes of the country. We have not seen Norway without a visit to the unforgettable Preikestolen. And then there's of course the dangerous Kjeragbolten hike, which was quite an adventure, but more on that later. By the way, if you haven't seen the first episode of my Norway documentary series, please make sure to check it out too. But let's continue on my grand Norwegian road trip to the Nordkapp. So far, I had been very lucky with the weather on my Norway trip. I had been able to experience Norway from its most sunny side. As I woke up in my night quarters near Stavanger, the morning, however, greeted me with thick clouds and light to heavier precipitation. Unfortunately, this was the day for which I had planned my first major hike in Norway. My plan was to head to the Kjeragbolten, the famous and infamous boulder that is wedged between two vertically dropping mountain faces on the Kjerag mountain, the highest peak along the gorgeous Lysefjorden. The boulder is a popular tourist destination and is accessible without any climbing equipment, but the hike to Kjeragbolten is considered a challenging route. The round-trip hike is about 11 kilometers long with an elevation gain of 800 meters. It is not for the faint-hearted and takes about 6 to 10 hours in good weather conditions. The trail is only open in the summer months and would be considered quite dangerous in the winter. Many consider this hike one of the most spectacular hikes in the world, and today was the day I was going to do it. The drive from Stavanger to Sinnes and onwards to the Kjerag trailhead location was nothing short of stunning. I passed pristine lakes, thick forests and marvelous settlements with the typical grassy roofs. The weather forecast was somewhat mixed, but still encouraging. Cloudy, but no rain. Even the sun showed its warming face once in a while. Eventually, I arrived at the trailhead parking lot, just above Lysefjorden. I put on my hiking gear and was ready to make the best out of the somewhat cloudy day. The hike was indeed not an easy feast. Steep rock sections caused other fellow hikers with inadequate shoes to slip and fall several times. Some sections were only passable by using the available metal chains to hold on to. Initially, the weather held up and followed the predictions of the forecast. Even the sun came through the clouds at times. But the closer I got to the famous boulder, the worse the weather conditions became, eventually resulting in a constant rain drizzle through ever-thickening clouds. Making my way through a tricky last passage in a small mountain creek with slippery rocks, mud and snow passages, I finally arrived at the boulder. Naturally, I was not alone. Several other hikers were as adventurous as me and wanted to take a picture on the boulder. And while the pictures look more scary than the reality on the ground, it still takes a bit of guts to jump on the boulder, knowing that behind it, the mountain face vertically drops down hundreds of meters into the fjord waters. the way back down to the trailhead must have been the least pleasant hike during my Norway trip. The rain drizzle turned into heavy rainfall, and the thick clouds released everything they had, engulfing me in a fog that at times only permitted few meters of visibility. The rocks on the loosely marked trail became quite slippery, and I was more than happy to eventually arrive at the Kjerag cafe, completely soaked and freezing, warming myself with some hot tea and yummy fish soup. The next morning, the clouds disappeared as quickly as they had emerged the day before. It was a Sunday morning and the sun was back in full glory. What a contrast to the day before. I was ready for yet another spectacular day. Today would be the day where I would venture on Norway's hands-down most famous trail, the Preikestolen, also known as the Pulpit Rock. Preikestolen is a steep cliff that rises 604 meters above Lysefjorden, the same fjord I saw the day before, but Preikestolen is located on the other end of the fjord, and there is no easy way that connects the two hikes. I had to drive a couple of hours to the ferry boat in Larvik. This would be the first of many ferry crossings I would undertake on my way to the Nordkapp. Unfortunately, my first ferry experience was also the one with the longest wait time. The small ferry boat was only able to take few cars on every trip. I passed the time by exploring the small harbor area. By the time it was finally my turn to drive onto the ferry, it was well past midday. The short trip offered beautiful views of the fjord, and I was much looking forward to see Lysefjorden from the monumental perspective of Preikestolen. Of course, I knew that Preikestolen was one of Norway's most visited natural tourist attractions, but little was I prepared for the tourism frenzy that should await me at the bottom of the road that heads to the trailhead of Norway's most famous mountain hike. It was Sunday, it was sunny, and the authorities had closed the access road earlier as many visitors had already occupied all available parking spots and the trail was deemed to be at maximum capacity. I had to wait for several hours until the access road opened again. By now, it was already late in the afternoon, but I was not discouraged. The hike is considered moderate and takes about 3 to 5 hours round trip. It follows a well-marked trail that's about 8 kilometers or 5 miles long. All the steeper passages are well prepared with Sherpa steps, making the hike very accessible for families and less accustomed hikers. While I did enjoy the rather easy hike, especially after my rather wet and challenging experience the day before, I found the hike to be quite overcrowded. On several occasions, the many hikers created traffic jams on the way up, and the overall experience often made me focus more on the people in front of me instead of taking in the nature around me. Having said all that, the view of Preikestolen is still well worth the hike. By the time I finally arrived at the Pulpit Rock, the sun had unfortunately disappeared and clouds were coming in again, but I nevertheless truly enjoyed the unrivaled view. The name Preikestolen translates to preacher's chair in Norwegian. The name makes sense as it relates to the suspended pulpits in older Norwegian churches. The Pulpit Rock cliff has a flat top with a surface of about 25 by 25 meters, and the unobstructed panorama down on the fjord has many travel aficionados and magazines called Preikestolen one of the world's most spectacular viewing points. On the next day, I headed back to the coast where I visited the historical Utstein Kloister, located on Klosteroy Island, a short 30-minute ride from Stavanger. Utstein Abbey is Norway's best preserved medieval monastery. Historical sources cite that Harald Fairhair, the first Viking king of Norway after the Battle of Lysefjorden in 1872, erected his royal estate here. The monastery itself, built for Augustinian monks, dates back to the 1260s. But it is possible that some parts of the building remained from the earlier royal period. The church is rather unique in Norway as it features a tower that is located between the choir and the nave. I enjoyed strolling through the colorful interior court, visiting the church interior and the adjacent museum that provides some more background on the rich history of the place. The exhibition tells the rather juicy story of Christopher Garman, who lived on the estate with his second wife Cecilie in the late 1700s. The story goes that he promised his wife on her deathbed that he would never remarry again. But 20 years later, he did take another wife, collapsed at the altar during the wedding ceremony, and died 8 days later. It is reported that Cecilie had appeared before him during the ceremony and that she still wanders relentlessly around the corridors of the monastery in her white gown. Thinking that this could be the story of a great movie, I headed to the adjacent island of Fjoloy, where I marveled at the beautiful scenery that engulfs the picturesque Fjoloy Lighthouse. Eventually, it was time to head further up north, taking another ferry, this time from Mortavika to Arsvagen. The scenery of this ferry crossing was just breathtaking. Light rains had made way for the evening sun. Watching a full arched rainbow behind me and the late evening sun go down in front of me was an epic experience I won't forget.